Hello, and thank you everyone for joining me on another round of JordanCon interviews. Today I am interviewing James Nettles, and he has a 30-year career consulting in the business world as a media contributor. He is a speaker on all sorts of topics. He teaches workshops on intellectual property, marketing and branding, social media, book development and publication, and the business of creativity. He is also the founder of Author Essentials, a company dedicated to education of authors and author services. He's also a co-founder of the tech and technical director of Continual, which is a convention, the never-ending convention, correct?
Correct.
And yet, with all of this, he still finds time to write.
Occasionally it
Welcome.
happens. Thanks for having me. So yeah, occasionally I get to still crank out books right now, working on some hard sci-fi again.
Excellent.
That ready for that to be done. Doing a lot of rewrites on that right now. But yeah, I do on the fiction side of the house, I've written science fiction, urban fantasy, bit of horror, bit of contemporary, a little bit of steampunk, a little bit of this, that, and the other.
Jack of many trades.
And occasionally sound like I know what I'm talking about, but not too often.
That's great.
And I write a lot of nonfic articles, stuff on entrepreneurship, privacy, data security, technology,
You are a
creativity.
busy man.
Oh, occasionally I get to sleep. So yeah, if I can play and cause trouble, I'm usually there. Happy to do it.
I'm excited to hear more about your writing a little bit. So you are quite quite all over the place in a way with fantasy and horror and fiction and mythology. So I'm curious what some of your favorite genres to write in are.
So it's really, and I will openly admit, this is one of those things. It's all about number one, mood and where I'm hitting. And like I say, right now, eventually I will get back to the urban fantasy side of the world. But right now, I'm working on a fair amount of sci-fi, both space opera, harder sci-fi, some tech-driven. Now I am, but on the urban fantasy side, I'm also trying to get the next gnome book out the door as well, since that's the one everybody's bugging me about. But right now, I've got a hard sci-fi. I've got a space opera in development. I've got I've got another novella in the Gnome series ready to come out. I'm working on the second book in the Business Essentials series for writers, and doing a fair number of workshops. So there's a fair amount in process right now. I actually got started in media a very, very long time ago. And so the first stuff I ever sold was all nonfic. It was articles and pieces like that. But I started selling short stories and things like that a very, very long time ago, before all the digital era,
uh,
under a few names and aliases to protect the
that's
guilty.
fun. I mean, I feel like especially when you're first starting out, it's good to have an alias and then you can be like, "What? That's not me." If you need to.
Well, one of the things that comes up, and we've done a lot of panels at conventions about, do you use a pen name? Do you not use a pen name?
Mhm.
Why do you use one? Why do you not? Well, things are a lot more forgiving now than they used to be. But when you travel and you do consulting and you work for software companies and you do all the kind of stuff that I've done, some of those companies may not necessarily be favorable to, oh, you write what?
Mhm.
um, it's a little bit easier than it used to be. So
I feel like with the new world of technology these days, that is a much more known, can be a much more known issue as well because, your whole life is potentially on the internet and easy to access and be judged for. So I feel like that's an interesting conversation to have about pen names and how
it
visible to be.
it is, and I mean visibility right now, and I mean one of the things that we've seen a lot of over the last couple of years is how people are perceived.
Mm-hmm.
because no matter what, you cannot make everybody happy, but at the same time, you don't want to be an absolute ass out in media.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of those things is over time, eventually, whoever the real you is going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a good human being, that's going to eventually come out. Generally, I'm just a smart ass, but and glad to have the cat coming in because I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a Zoom call without
I
without.
know, honestly. They know and they're like, make me be a part of this. Let's see.
So I mean that
Maybe she'll just take a nap.
it's fine, but from a writing perspective, it's one of those things that you write because you have to. It's like being any other kind of creative outlet. I am a firm believer in and a strong advocate that everybody needs to have a creative outlet. You don't necessarily have to be trying to do it because you want to be making a name or for yourself or trying to make money at it or make a living at it. But I am a firm advocate that everybody needs to have that creative outlet.
Mm-hmm.
For me, writing fiction is a big creative outlet. I've been fortunate enough to, start having a little bit of a name, poking around certain places and getting a bit of a following and other, some of the other things that we're doing. But I make a lot more from writing nonfiction and other things that I do. But I love to write fiction because I mean it's much easier to kill somebody on the page than to get rid of the body. Um, so writing is one of those things that you've got to be driven to do, and I mean
Yeah.
otherwise it's a lot of hours sitting there and trying to come up with creative ways to torture your characters, come up with all the ways to work your friends in so that you can go and point and have a little bit of fun with them
Be
and
like,
on
hey,
that
that's
front.
you, that's you. Yeah.
When some of the names you get to play with when it's like, yeah, I slipped you into the book, let's see if you can find yourself. I've got the great pleasure of having been killed in a number of series or
Oh, what a
sometimes
badge of
not so.
honor.
Yep, apparently I am now. JD Blackrose has a new urban fantasy trilogy coming out, and apparently I am a pixie in that.
I love it.
So she's not let me see how she worked me in this time, but yeah, it's the fun stuff you get
That'll
to
be
do as a
fun.
writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so one of, you know, for me, I love to nerd out about Star Trek. And so I'm curious what you love to nerd out about.
Yes. uh,
All of the above?
all of the above.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I am an old tech hound. I've been, but I grew up on sci-fi. I grew up on sci-fi in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
A great golden era of Star Trek and Star Wars. Having seen the original Star Wars in the theater
Yeah.
and all the B movie knockoffs, and I'm a huge fan of all of the old, the old monster movies and monster films, and you name it, and the answer is probably yes.
Yeah. Well, and I
Um,
mean, for me personally, I could nerd out about Star Wars or Star Trek. I don't pick, because I like both. They're just different.
mhm.
Similar with monsters and horror. It's fun to have the remakes and watch what they've done, but the originals are just a lot of fun too. So it's fun to geek out about those things.
And it's also a lot more fun to see that from the good old days when you didn't necessarily take yourself so seriously, but you
Hmm.
really worked on story.
Yeah.
And so much stuff that's done now is focused on the special effects, the big explosions,
Yeah.
where we just did a panel for Continual talking about Doctor Who and the good old days of pretty much they were running on 20 pounds and a bunch of beer, and that was their budget for special effects to see how many people they could get in a silver suit.
Yeah.
But there's a reason that they've survived for more than 50 years is because the story connecting to the characters, and it wasn't so much about
Okay,
the
sorry.
special effects.
She just needed some attention. Okay. I was gonna comment on how in the old days they didn't take themselves so seriously, and I automatically thought of Plan 9 from Outer Space.
One of my favorite
Like,
films.
so horribly amazing.
I have it on DVD somewhere. I think it's downstairs. So I love Ed Wood.
Yeah,
Um,
he's
you know,
great.
one
But you know, the funny thing about Ed Wood is I feel like he actually took himself very seriously, and he had no idea that he would be such a an icon of sorts.
well, and I think that goes back to creativity.
Yeah.
He had he had a vision. He didn't have a budget,
Yep.
and he had some brilliant, if sometimes awful ideas that everybody went and said, I can. And I think that that's part of what created a fandom
Yeah.
is, and that's one of those great things about being a fan in sci-fi and fantasy
Mm-hmm.
is people get hooked in the story. People get hooked on the characters. You know who they are. You can quote the lines back to them, no matter how bad, how cheesy, how much
Yeah.
fun they were. Um, and I think that sometimes, I mean, I think we're seeing another renaissance of that again in some of the movies and films. And I think we're also seeing a lot of the time people with a huge budget are taking themselves way too seriously, and the fun is being lost in some of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Um, but yeah, I grew up on all of it. Still a huge fan of all of it. I mean, if you look in all the morass behind me, you know, I've actually got a Luke Skywalker collector's figure back there. That what's funny is that there's a typo on the box, which is the reason I've got it there. We'll pull it out occasionally. Is they misspelled Skywalker on the front of the box for a black
What
collectible.
a fun collector's edition type thing.
You know, little things like that, and you know, it's a lot of fun. I mean, but again, you can't take it but so seriously. And the downside then of being a writer is when you watch stories and you start going, well, that was a plot hole, or why on
Yeah.
earth did they do that?
I could have
You
done it better. Yeah.
you well, I mean, you know, backseat quarterbacking, or you know,
Yeah.
coaching or writing, as the case may be. But you look and go, all they had to do was this. They set up everything for it, and then they did what? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not a twist. That was being lazy.
Yeah.
Um, it, but you know that's the great fun of geeking out on stuff. Got to have fun with it.
It's true. It's true. And at the same time, don't take yourself too seriously when you're watching them, cuz otherwise you do end up judging it for how it was made as opposed to what they could have done instead.
It's like a show that I'm trying to pull back out of hiatus is called Creating Pros. You know, the tagline is take the work seriously and yourself not so much.
Mhm. That's great. That's a great tagline. What's that show about?
It's one that is all about creativity and how you build that, treat it as a business, and how people have developed their business and careers. The way I'm bringing it back is going to be a mixture of interviews with other people and
Uh-huh.
teaching like little mini workshops along the way.
Oh, great.
Um, and some of it's just going to be whatever I happen to be, you know, whatever shiny object I happen to be interested in at the time. Um, and trying to make it apply back to things that are going on. Was working on recording an episode the other day about NFTs, what they are, what they really aren't,
Mhm.
you know, and some of that stuff,
How strange
because
they are.
how strange they are, what they are right now, and what they're going to be in probably the next few years.
I feel like they're the new Beanie Baby, but that's just my own opinion of them. Yeah.
There is a lot of promise there. That's all I'm going to say. That's the
Yeah.
teaser for whenever this one happens to drop.
Yes. Um so is that something that you will end up work is that series something that you're going to work into your continual? Is that something that you do with that, or is that unrelated?
It will air it through Continual as well.
Uh-huh.
It'll go through the Author Essentials channel and all that stuff. Because I've been rebuilding, and we've been rebuilding and porting everything over. So right now I'm in the series of doing a lot of different workshops.
Mhm.
that's really where my head is at the moment. But for Continual, we have a number of different shows and series. We're coming up on 2 years, and we've put out somewhere in the neighborhood of about 600 hours of content. Um, we
Wow.
we just had show 100 a couple of weeks ago for the Panel Room, which was our premiere show. You know,
Exciting.
which just started out as a, hey, we're going to come and talk about a topic. What happened was I've been playing with building a small network and doing media stuff and the podcast and stuff
Hmm.
around creativity. And Gail Z. Martin pinged Gail Martin, John Hartness, a couple of others that, we regularly do stuff together. I've been talking about doing this for a while, and everybody was like, will anybody show up for something virtual? And one morning, Gail was on vacation. We had just had RavenCon and some other stuff canceled. And I got a ping from Gail, and she said, okay, so I did a thing. What do we do next? And the thing was, we had a logo and a name for Continual, the con that never ends. A week later, we were recording our first two shows, The Panel Room and Hot Off the Press, which is a new releases show.
Hmm.
And it's since then grown to where we have a comics track and a comics layer. We do a special event series, holiday stuff,
Hmm.
different shiny objects. We've got two fandom tracks, one of which is Gail's dedicated entirely to Supernatural, the TV show, and another
That's
one
great.
that's more generic fandom type of stuff.
Hmm.
We've got a series called an Hour With, which is bigger names in the business coming in and talking about their career, their series. We've had a lot of different fun and interesting people there. We have a couple of other new shows that are in the works as well. Um, so yeah, Creating Pros will be one of the ones that we bring in as a part of that as well.
Hmm.
Um,
So, as a follow up question, kind of doing with the con, do you find that you are a better staff member and or guest because you've been on both sides? Like, what do you feel like what have you gained, and what do you really like about the fact that you've been on both sides of this whole convention experience?
well, I probably have a little bit more different view than a lot of people. I grew up doing events.
Uh-huh.
So I grew up on the backside of doing a lot of different types of events, conventions, everything from a few dozen people to a few hundred people to thousands of people. I work with a number of Scottish games around the southeast. A number of other things. So I understand both sides of it. That's when I'm like, something goes wrong, you smile, you nod, you move on.
Yeah.
Because I don't think what a lot of people know is that most conventions are 100% volunteers.
Yep.
These are people doing it because they love it. They want
Mhm.
to see done. I mean, I've done work with, I was a science and tech director for a while for Con Carolinas. I still am involved with Con Carolinas. With all the different conventions that I've worked with over the years, not just in genre, but across the board. It's a fun thing to be behind the scenes, the people you get to know, the people you get to meet. But you also really get that appreciation for how much work really goes into putting something on.
You have a better
Um,
appreciation for the volunteers that have decided to put on the. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're sitting there. It takes a lot more time than I think anybody realizes to put
Yeah.
something on.
Takes a
Uh,
village.
it takes a village, and frequently I'm the idiot. Uh, but this is one of those things I encourage fans to do.
Hmm.
And I encourage writers to do, create artists to do. Get involved with don't do what I've necessarily done, which is probably work with way too many. But get involved with one. Understand how the
Yeah.
mechanics works, because number one, you'll appreciate a whole lot more what it takes to put on an event in a convention, especially the volunteers. But the other thing you'll get to understand is with the mechanics of it, what works well, what doesn't. You get to learn the personality of different
Mm-hmm.
events and conventions. You get to learn the personality of the fans that come and go.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I
the
mean, each convention is unique, and the people who attend them are very different. So that's true. Getting to know what kinds of fans are at each convention is really, I think that's really good advice.
and one of the things is this is because a lot of people in the creative space, writers, artists, are fairly introverted.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you don't necessarily have that comfort level, building that kind of a relationship and friendships with people at conventions makes it a whole lot easier
Yeah.
when you're back on a panel, when you're back behind your booth and your table, when you're doing all these different sorts of things. It feels like a much more natural environment where it's almost more like being at home. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of hotels that you walk into, and the second you walk in there, like, okay, I know where I'm at. I know the mood of the hotel. I know the mood of the town. I know how it's going to go. And I mean, every convention winds up being a little bit different. Some of them are great and a lot of fun. Some of them, may wind up not being. But if you walk in with the attitude of I'm here to do business. I'm here to have some fun. I'm here to meet people, and I'm here. Yeah, once you're there, you shift into that mode and just
Yeah.
I know people that walk in. I have these sales goals, and if I don't hit these, I'm gonna be pissed. I
Yeah.
know people that
That's a
walk
really
in.
sad attitude to walk into a convention with, I feel like.
Well, I mean, having an idea because again, being a writer, doing a lot of events and conventions can get quite expensive.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And so, obviously, revenues and what conventions you're at and making those trips worthwhile is a part of the equation. But the other part of it is if you're going to one purely from an economic sense,
Mm-hmm.
then you're probably going to miss out on a lot of the opportunity. And you're also going to allow that to influence your mood,
Mm-hmm.
generally not in a good way.
Yeah.
And if you come in from the attitude of I'm going to try to enjoy myself no matter where I'm at, have a good time. Sales are great. It's easy to have fun.
Yeah.
Sales aren't great, but you get to meet people you haven't met before, or you get to talk to people, you get to network, you get to sit in the bar with a publisher,
Mm-hmm.
you get to sit in the bar with another writer, and all of a sudden a project comes out of it.
Yeah. You have
You,
different kinds of connections and outcomes.
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of things that create value into coming to something like JordanCon. Last year was the first year I've actually gotten to go to JordanCon because a lot of years it falls on top of another event that I'm a director for.
Uh-huh.
So it gets to be fun in the scheduling, but I had a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
in the midst of pandemic and everything else, trying to keep everybody safe and healthy, small crowd,
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of fun and a lot of good stuff came out of it. And
Well, I know this is going to be my first convention in a couple years, just because of the pandemic. So I'm really excited to be going and meeting new people like you, in person and seeing people, not just on a computer screen. So I've always loved going to JordanCon for that reason because it is small and I feel like I've gotten to know people on a much more personal level than at some other conventions I've been to. But I'm really glad that you finally had the schedule to be able to come last year and are coming again this year.
looking forward to it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great hotel. It is a lot of fun to come and do. I really enjoy the fact that you guys are doing the virtual side of this as well because number one, there's a lot of people that can't necessarily come,
Yeah.
and one of the questions we've gotten a lot of with continue on the virtual side of things is about are we going to keep doing it now the conventions are coming back? And it's like why would we stop?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that we reach that will never see at a convention, despite the fact I've done, most of the ones I do are here in the Southeast.
Mm-hmm.
I've done West Coast. I've done Northeast, and I'm planning to do a lot more traveling over the next couple of years as I'm doing, more and more of these workshops. But the fact of on a virtual panel, you can pull together from people from all over the world that would never likely ever get a chance to sit in a room and have a
Hmm.
conversation about something.
It's unique. It's kind of amazing.
And these never go away.
Hmm.
If I sit in a panel room, whether it's 5 people sitting in the audience or 500 or
Yeah.
5,000 sitting there, once that's done and over, it's done and over.
Hmm.
This, especially if you're getting a lot out of a panel or you're getting a lot out of a conversation, you know, you can always go back and watch it again. You can
Revisit it
listen,
like a good
revisit
book.
it, take your notes,
Yeah.
look and go, who is this moron that keeps running his mouth?
Hey,
There's a
I
lot of
did not
fun.
say that.
um, you got to go and have the good attitude about it. And this
Hmm.
is one of those things that honestly at times can be hard because there are times when life happens, and when life happens, when once you get to a convention, you as the writer, you as an artist, you as a vendor, you as a whatever, that when you get there, you got to flip that off and be on.
Yeah.
And again, kind of going back to being behind the scenes, if you've got that kind of friendship and relationship with the crowd that's there, it can make some of those tougher times a whole lot easier as well. So I mean, I absolutely encourage people, look at and understand, who's running things in a way that you feel comfortable and
Hmm.
safe, and then, it's not that hard to figure out.
So, on your guest application for attending JordanCon, you put that you have an interest in RPG board games and card games. What is your experience with that, and do you play any games currently?
So off and on. I've played off and on for a very long time.
Hmm.
Like a lot of people of my generation, as I turned gray and old and all the rest of that. I was one of the ones that was told, oh, we were going to hell because we were playing D&D in high school.
Ah.
Um, I played some in high school because it's fun. Again, it's one of those things that you can take as seriously as you want to. When I was in college, we actually played. We had every Sunday night was a game night. We had a bunch of us that we would do different things. It could be we would sit and play spades and hearts. It could be playing Pathfinder. It could be in fact, for a while, we played diplomacy until the point we got to the point where none of us could trust each other. Um, and over time, it's one of those things that I am not a serious gamer. I'm not somebody that's going to sit there and die over it unless there's
Hmm.
money involved. Um, but right now, I mean, I hadn't sat and played an RPG in years until a couple of years ago. We used to, again, traveling and whatnot. I had a small crowd when we used to work together. We would sit there and do some play RPGs and stuff at night, sometimes sitting in hotel rooms because it was a nice way to blow off steam and stuff like that. Well, it had been several years since I'd played at all, and we were Chris Jackson, who writes for the Pathfinder. He writes a series for Pathfinder. We took his characters out of his Pathfinder book and played a campaign based off of them. And Chris made me the bosun, who's this giant orc, kind of, okay, break shit and blow shit up. And I'm like, I can do that. And so we went on, and I took it, and we were recording and playing around and doing this ship to ship thing. And I'm like, okay. And I'd read one of the books with the characters, so I at least had a little bit of a feel for them because we were trying to play true to the characters, and
Yeah.
everybody else is getting all super serious and everything else. And I'm like, so yeah, those barrels of the explosive stuff over here, there's like 100 guys over there. What happens if I throw one of those barrels over at the ship? And he goes, and I could just see this look of, oh no. And I'm like, great. So I pick up the barrel, hurl it at the other ship, boom. You kill 20 of them. How many barrels are left? I, and so that's the way I tend to be
Creative
the
troublemaker.
absolutely. It was like, and you set the ship on fire. Were we planning to
Of
capture
course.
it? No. Great. Grab me another barrel. Um,
How many do we have left?
how many are left? So playing RPGs, stuff like that to me is a tremendous amount of fun. I'm not great at it, I admit that, but it's the story. I've DM'd games. I've done stuff like that. The other thing I've had a lot of fun with, my niece and nephew are heavy gamers.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't get to see them that often, but we'll sit and play games and play some of the most obnoxious stuff. And it's fun watching and storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really love games that are geared around things that are going to be different and things that are going to create story.
Yeah.
And the ideas you have to come up with on the fly. And so right now, I'm working with a co-author, and we're developing a lit RPG series that
Ooh.
may or may not ever see the light of day, but hopefully it will. The first one is going to edits. I am about halfway through my first draft of mine. We're going to try to release 4 or 5 of these a year, novella length.
How fun.
And it's very tech driven. It's kind of it's a little bit of cyberpunk meets Rick and Morty, I would say. So, and his type of
Fun
mayhem and my,
combo.
yeah, it's apocalyptic, sort of, and his take on apocalyptic and my take on apocalyptic are a little different because, again, I'm the kind that's going to go and say, how do I blow that up? But the fun part, again, this is one of those things you don't have to take seriously, other than build a good story,
Yeah.
have fun with the characters, and then the most fun part of it is it's one of those things where when you're telling the story, it's a question of what is the most obnoxious thing that I can possibly do with this, and then how do we pour tequila on it? And that's the beautiful part of it. And so it's a lot of fun. The parts I've written so far have been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
We are openly basing the characters in the series because right now his group is set out of New Orleans. They're trying to make their way north. My group right now is currently set out of Charlotte. But we're openly taking and abusing our friends and slightly changing the names and details to make them a little more guilty. And we'll see how this goes.
What a fun adventure. Well, I'm excited to see what comes of this. I will be following closely because it sounds very interesting.
Let's hope it will be.
Yeah. So I would like to wrap up with just a couple of fun questions. Do you have a favorite curse word?
I am a true believer in the most utilitarian of curse words that's out there. And there's one very utile curse word. Now, being from the South, and this is part of that fun part of having been trained in anthropology and stuff like this, is understanding the etymology of language. My mother was an English teacher. Knowing and understanding the origins of words, and sometimes kind of trying to come up, one of the hardest things to do sometimes can be to come up with a new curse word.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
But it's a lot harder than you would think it would be. But I am a classical fan of the old F-bomb because the word fuck can be used in so many ways, carry so many tones, and be absolutely the perfect word, and one that will cause dismay in so many people. So you have to use it sparingly. It's a little bit like ghost peppers.
Yeah. Ugh.
But it's one of those things that in the right environment can add that bit of flavor and spice. And especially with the audiobook, making sure that the narrator knows how to carry the particular tone of
inflection,
the correct inflection, because that's the hardest part that you often can lose on paper.
It's true.
Is what's the tone, what's the inflection.
It's true.
See, even the cat gets it.
The cat gets it. She gets it. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for joining me today. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to meeting you in person in April.
Absolutely looking forward to it. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and it was great to get to meet you virtually.
Yeah.
Until we get to do this in person in a couple of weeks.
And it is only going to be a couple of weeks. Well, thank you.
Appreciate it.